Have you ever wondered how you would survive if you went back to the time when God descended on Egypt and the very first thing you saw was the Nile rolling by like a slow crimson snake? The river that normally shimmers blue-green in the morning haze now glints like fresh pomegranate juice under a hot desert sun. The air smells faintly of iron. Your sandals stick to mud, the color of dried blood, and somewhere a priest is already wailing that the gods have abandoned their posts. You might not survive, but that's the whole thrill, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments so I know who's drifting off with us tonight. Now find a comfortable place to lie down, turn on a small fan, relax, and let's start our journey tonight. You blink a few times, half expecting someone to yell cut, but this is no film set. Papyrus boats list at crooked angles against the docks of Pyrameses, the northern capital of Pharaoh, Ramses II. Yesterday, those same barges were stacked with grain taxes bound for the royal granaries. Today, the grain is ruined, soaked through with a liquid that stains faster than wine. You overhear a sailor hiss that every fish in his net surfaced belly up within moments, scales reflecting scarlet like tiny mirrors, and he swears he can still hear them gasping in his nightmares. A scribal apprentice races past you, scroll clutched to his chest. By Ra's eyelids, the river bleeds. He mutters tear marks cutting through red dust on his cheeks. You want to assure him you're not a hallucination, but your throat is dry, and the coppery air makes talking feel like licking a coin. Instead, you trail behind him toward the quayside where a crowd has gathered. Some stare in horror, others with an unsettling pragmatism fill clay jugs, blood water or not. Life in the Delta still needs hydration. A grandmother scolds her teenage grandson for trying to sell the stuff as a miracle cure. Downstream temple attendants scoop the river into shallow saucers for ritual inspection. One elder priest lifts the saucer in both palms, and even from where you stand, you can see that the liquid is thick, almost syrupy, far too viscous to be water alone. A low murmuring rolls across the crowd like distant thunder. Is this the doing of the Hebrew God? Is he here? In the far distance, a courier's horse thunders toward Memphis carrying a streaked banner that used to be white. Despite the surreal horror, the marketplace clings to routine. A potter kicks his wheel with stoic determination, slapping gray clay into the shape of an amphora. He catches your eye and shrugs. River's red, rents still due, he says, voice flat as unfired terracotta. You nod because honestly, what else is there to do? Suddenly, a scholar from the House of Life launches into an impromptu lecture. You didn't ask for. Historians still debate whether volcanic dust from the distant eruption of Santorini could have triggered a toxic red algae bloom that suffocated the fish, he says, adjusting reed pens behind his ear. Others propose an unusually high surge of ochre-rich silt from upriver rains. His tone is equal parts curiosity and panic, like someone trying to solve a puzzle that's simultaneously on fire. You're grateful for the speculation, anything to ground this nightmare in natural law, but even the scholar's logic trembles like a reed in strong wind. You decide to wander the edges of the floodplain in search of calmer ground. Red foam laps at papyrus stalks, and egrets circle uncertainly, unwilling to land. When you step closer, your feet sink into sludge that looks uncomfortably like a field surgeon's basin. You remind yourself to walk lightly. These sandals were never meant for coagulated rivers. Farther along, a group of field workers debate whether to abandon their season's barley. The foreman scratches his shaved scalp and sighs. If Osiris can't drink, neither can we. Nearby, a little girl in a faded linen dress crouches to touch the water, her fingertips leaving pale trails on the surface. Her mother yanks her back so quickly, the child nearly drops her clay doll. It's painted with blue lapis spell symbols that in calmer times were meant to ward off scorpions. You wonder if they work on plagues. An unusual hush falls. You pivot toward the main road in time to see Pharaoh's gold-inlaid chariot rolling in wheels, hissing through slick mud. Ramses Tikkun himself stands tall, bronze skin gleaming falcon-headed crown, catching shafts of sunlight. He surveys the unnatural river with the faintest twitch of distaste, like a host discovering someone double-dipped in the hummus. An attendant whispers something. Ramses's jaw tightens, but he says nothing. Sovereignty does not permit visible dread, yet you notice his knuckles whitening on the chariot rail. Moments later, trumpeters sound a sharp, dissonant note. A proclamation echoes across the plaza. All citizens are to boil water, stock grain above flood level, and remain calm, someone in the crowd. Maybe the same budding entrepreneur from earlier shouts back, does boiled blood turn into soup or steam? Nervous laughter flits fragile as dragonfly wings. You retreat into a narrow alley for shade. The plaster walls are cool, a small mercy, and the scent of simmering onions drifts from an unseen doorway. Egyptians, you reflect, can turn any ingredient into a stew, even existential dread. A cat slips between your ankles, tail flicking crimson droplets onto your calf. You've heard that felines are sacred to Bastet. You're not sure even a goddess can keep fur clean in times like these. The sun climbs. Heat amplifies the stench until each breath feels like inhaling a butcher's stall. You spot an elderly perfumer waving bundles of myrrh smoke in desperate zigzags, trying to mask the odor. He sells small pouches of scented sand for a handful of debased copper coins. You buy one out of pity, inhales citrus-spiked resin, and tell yourself it almost works. News travels fast upriver at Thebes. The festival of Opet has ground to a halt. The sacred barks that were supposed to glide in stately procession now bob listlessly, their ceremonial sails limp. Pilgrims mutter that Amun-Ra refuses to tread a blood river. Maybe he's off-world today. You recall reading well in the future, you will read that Nile floods are normally a sign of blessing. The scarlet deluge feels more like a cosmic prank. By late afternoon, royal envoys order citizens to draw drinking water from shallow wells rather than the river. You and 24 others queue beside a limestone shaft. At the front, a man lowers a bucket and pulls up. More red. Someone behind you groans. The envoy crumples his official directive, like yesterday's papyrus, and stomps away. Amid the frustration, you overhear a delightful oddity. One household is using crushed pomegranate seeds to sweeten the already red water, convinced that like cures like. The logic is thin, but the taste, they claim, is almost tolerable. Egyptians have long flavored beer with date syrup. Perhaps they'll brew a new vintage called blood lager. Stranger things have happened. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? As dusk bleeds, pun, hopelessly intended into night, oil lamps cast wavering halos on puddles that glint ruby under the moon. The chatter fades to whispers, as though everyone has collectively slipped under a heavy linen sheet of dread. You find a rooftop to sleep on. Higher is drier, and watch bats skim the tainted water for insects too slow or too bold to adapt. Your eyelids grow heavy, fan-cooled by the delta breeze that still smells of copper and tattered rituals. You close your eyes, wondering if this is only the first act. What in Horus's name comes next? When dawn finally nudges your eyelids apart, the first sound you register isn't the flutter of doves or the hum of early vendors. It's an endless, rubbery croak, 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 rolling across the rooftops like someone testing 1,000 leather bellows at once. You sit up on your borrowed roof neck, stiff, and peer over the parapet. The Nile is still a bruised red ribbon, but now its banks seem to ripple. Then the ripples hop. Thousands, no tens of thousands of frogs are pouring out of irrigation ditches, sluicing through streets, and launching themselves with reckless enthusiasm at everything vertical. A small green blur slaps against your forearm, slides down and lands with a wet plop on the clay tiles. It blinks, flexes its pale throat sac, and lets out a soprano chirp, as though announcing itself the new landlord. You glance at your sandal, notice 3 more passengers clinging to the straps, and decide you've officially lost the rental deposit on today. Down in the alley, a baker staggers from his doorway, flour dusting his beard like desert snow. He holds a broken reed broom like a pharaoh's scepter, swinging uselessly as amphibian infantry hop between his feet and straight into the still warm bread baskets. Out, out you slimy little Seth spawn, his voice cracks. The frogs do not care. One lands squarely on a loaf, sinking half its body into the soft middle as if testing a mattress. You watch the baker's expression melt from fury into resigned calculation. Frog-embedded bread could be a novelty. You mouth a sympathetic tough day. He shrugs, tosses the broom, and starts flipping amphibians onto the street with the flat of his palm like a bored croupier dealing cards. You weave through the chaos toward the palace quarter. Last night's proclamation boards now sport a second notice, tacked below. All citizens to place woven rush mats beneath sleeping pallets. Frogs dislike rough surfaces. The suggestion feels like handing someone an umbrella during a sandstorm, but you admire the optimism. Inside the courtyard of a modest townhouse, you spot an odd little tableau. 2 servants carefully drape linen over an ornamental pond, trapping a dozen croakers beneath. Their mistress' eyes, red from sleeplessness, mutters that Heket, the frog-headed goddess of fertility, must be furious. She presses a carved frog amulet to her lips for luck. It's a genuine artifact. Egyptian midwives actually did carry such charms, believing the creatures heralded safe birth. The scene might be sweet if the linen weren't twitching like a bread loaf full of springs. Another leap, another squelch. A scribe's apprentice skids by, scroll case, clattering, yelling. The record halls flooded with them, literally flooded. A noble woman retorts, "Tell the frogs to bring their own ink. The scribes are out." Her sarcasm earns a ripple of nervous laughter. Humor is brittle glass today, but it's all that stands between panic and meltdown. You duck into the shade of the Temple of Ptah to escape the rising sun and hopefully the rising frog tide. No luck. Amphibians squat on every statue base, gilded toe, and lotus-painted lintel. A young priest attempts to sweep them aside before the morning rites. His reed brush snaps in half. He sighs, claps twice, and starts chanting, anyway voice echoing over the croaks like a baritone over a children's choir. In a side chamber, court officials are busy not panicking. A herald reads a list of postponed events: river procession for the Opet festival, canal dredging near Tanis, and this one stings the grand rehearsal for Pharaoh Ramses II's first said festival, that massive royal jubilee scheduled for his 30th regnal year. The said festival is a real historical marker, a public renewal of a king's divine vigor. Canceling even a rehearsal looks bad. Historians still debate whether Ramses actually staged an early sed to flaunt his vitality, one gray-haired archivist mutters, but frogs were definitely not on the guest list. You slip back outside, only to find that vendors have pivoted with disturbing speed. One sells cedar pitch oil said to repel amphibians. Another hawks miniature ceramic cats. Best guardians against plagues, 2 for 1. The entrepreneurial teen from yesterday now balances a tray of frog kebabs, each skewered on a reed stick. He winks. Protein's protein. You gag, but a few hungry workers shell out coins, shrugging that dinner options are limited when the river smells like an abattoir. As you cross a stone footbridge, your sandals skate on a teeming carpet of slippery bodies. You practice frog avoidance, ballet, left hop, right, shuffle, apologetic murmur, sorry buddy. Big step over a cluster doing synchronized squats. Suddenly, your right foot lands on soft gelatin, splat. You flail for the railing, nearly collide with an elderly astrologer peering through a cracked bronze astrolabe. He mutters that the constellation Nile crocodile doesn't predict amphibian storms, then furiously recalculates. You're tempted to suggest a refund, but karma's delicate when every gutter is alive. By midday, the sun blasts down, like a smith's furnace, intensifying the reek of hot mud and cold slime. The frogs, heat-drunk, start seeking shade inside everything. You watch one noble's litter topple as bearers scream, flinging the curtains open to reveal a lapful of wriggling green intruders. The noble himself, powdered wig askew, stumbles out, ranting about frog conspiracies while slapping at his robe. A guard offers to escort him home. 2 more frogs leap from the guard's helmet crest, plop into the noble's shoe, and the rant refreshes at higher volume. You duck into a granary, hoping for respite. Inside, laborers form a bucket brigade, except the buckets are full of frogs, not grain. They scoop the creatures into wicker baskets, march them outside, dump them into canals, from which the frogs merrily hop back. Sisyphean toil in amphibian form. One exasperated worker tells you Egyptians once used dried frog powder as a fever remedy. Maybe the gods decided to deliver the medicine wholesale. You suggest he invoice the divine pharmacy. He laughs, the first genuine laugh you've heard since the river reddened, then wipes his brow and returns to the feudal bucket line. Near sundown, you reapproach the palace gates. Ramses II, ever the showman, is perched atop marble steps, holding court in what looks suspiciously like imperial calm. Around him, croaks rage on, but his face remains a mask of controlled boredom. A hush falls as Pharaoh's vizier announces that magicians of the royal court have matched the plague by conjuring their own frogs, proof, he claims, that Egypt's gods still command the elements. A murmur spreads: if conjurers can invite frogs, surely they can banish them. You note a tiny smirk on a Hebrew envoy's face. He knows you know the frogs haven't read the contract. The vizier's pet priest steps forward, holding a lacquered box that supposedly contains their summoned specimen. He unlatches it. Nothing hops out. A snicker ripples through the crowd. Perhaps the frog escaped early. Ramses's jaw tightens again. Meanwhile, real frogs scale the very podium, their moist toes squeaking against alabaster. One lands neatly on the vizier's shoulder, like an unscheduled epaulette. You feel a spike of schadenfreude. The crowd roars. Even Pharaoh's mask slips infinitesimally. Was that a suppressed laugh? Hard to tell under the falcon eyeliner. Night approaches cooler air, carrying the scent of lotus incense, mingled with swamp funk. You make camp inside an abandoned storeroom door, slightly ajar, to invite Bree's bedroll perched atop stacked amphora to avoid low-level hoppers. For lighting, you balance an oil lamp on an upside-down wine jar. Its flicker paints frog shadows that leap across mud brick walls like living hieroglyphs. You count croaks instead of sheep: 1 croak, 2 croak, 500 croak, give up. Somewhere nearby, a poet mutters stanzas about emerald storm tides, trying to salvage beauty from bedlam. Just before sleep, claims you a haunting realization settles. Yesterday, blood today, frogs. That suspicious scholar's lecture resurfaces in your mind. Volcanoes, algae, cosmic wrath, take your pick. Regardless, the celestial domino line has tipped, and you're only on day 2. You clutch your scented sand pouch, citron myrrh, with a hint of Maybe Works placebo to your chest, and whisper, please, no more jumping food. Then a final amphibian thumps onto the lamp, snuffing the flame. Darkness croaks heartbeat. Sleep, if it comes, will be wet and unpredictable, like everything in Egypt this week. Still, you let your breathing slow, matching the languid fan breeze, while frogs drum a strange lullaby on ceramic and stone. Maybe tomorrow will bring quiet, or maybe it'll bring something that bites harder than it hops. The frogs are still croaking faintly when first light brushes the horizon, but most of them have already begun to shrivel into little leather pouches. You'd celebrate the quieter soundtrack if the morning breeze weren't stinging your cheeks with hot desert grit. At first, the wind feels like the usual Khamsin that scours Egypt every spring, abrasive, angry, and oddly invigorating. Then one grain crawls across the back of your hand. Another burrows into the sweaty fold behind your ear. Congratulations, day 3, has brought a dust storm full of living lice. Dignity evaporates faster than a puddle in Thebes. You slap, claw, and jitter down the granary ladder in a full-body itch dance. Every passerby performs a similar choreography: palace guards, fishmongers, perfumed nobles. A vendor who yesterday bragged about frog kebabs now yanks at his beard, shrieking as white specks march like infantry between the hairs. He looks ready to amputate his own chin. Gusts funnel through alleys, turning Cairo's mud brick canyons. Yes, it was called Memphis then, but your brain retrofits names for comfort into swirling tan whirlpools. You wrap a linen scarf over your mouth and taste both dust and panic. A matron shouts, "Cover the wells." Another screams back, "What's the point? They're in my wig." She tears off a tower of braided human hair, elite fashion, and flings it like a Molotov of bugs. Inside the potter's workshop, the potter you met on day one kicks his wheel in frantic bursts, trying to seal jars before lice embed themselves in the wet clay. "They'll fire into little porcelain curses," he mutters, flicking one away. You give him a helpless shrug and head for the palace quarter. A scribe streaks past, scalp glistening. Egyptians once shaved every hair to beat parasites and heat while donning perfumed wigs for ceremonies, a strange yet practical fashion fact. Today, the wigs are gone and the razors out. On a balcony, a noblewoman hacks away with a bronze blade, leaving half her head smooth as an ostrich egg. Below, a barber advertises emergency full-body shaves with jars of jasmine oil for post-shear shine. At the palace gates, you find a courtyard turned clinic. Cedar tubs brim with diluted natron, and royal attendants order courtiers to dunk themselves for purification. Ramses II is nowhere in sight. Rumor claims he's barricaded in a chamber swathed in cinnamon smoke servants, fanning madly to keep the air clear. The vizier, splotchy and red-eyed, tries to sound authoritative. "Maintain decorum. The gods test our patience." A louse slides down his nose like a tear. Decorum trips and face plants. Wind intensifies. You duck into the hall of pillars, trailing an itch so ferocious it might spark. There, a crisis council of priests debates strategy. One proposes flooding Memphis with lotus-scented water to weigh down the dust, logistically impossible but fragrant. A temple historian notes in a shaky script that they'll record this suggestion for posterity. That papyrus remarkably does end up in a 20th century museum case, a real historical event you're now witnessing in full scratch surround. An elderly astrologer, the same one who tried recalibrating star charts for frogs, approaches head newly bald and gleaming with sandalwood oil. Historians still debate whether this plague describes lice ticks or biting midges, he says, adjusting a copper stylus already crawling with invaders. You thank him for the unsolicited trivia and flick a bug from his collar. Outside, the storm turns streets into sepia blizzards. Children cry as mothers rake ivory combs through curls, leaving tiny hailstones of insects on the pavement. Enterprising youths sell scratch sticks carved from sycamore guaranteed relief or new itch-free business booms. Midday heat turns itching into torture. You join a queue at a public bathhouse. The attendants ladle tepid water, already swirling with dead lice over patrons' shoulders. One mixes crushed garlic with wild mint into a paste. Smells awful. Lice hate it, he insists. You slather the pungent goo along your neck. It burns like fresh papyrus cuts, but wards off immediate crawlers. Rumors churn in the steamy air. An unrecorded solar eclipse angered Ra. Rotting frog carcasses birthed these parasites. Divine retribution escalates because Pharaoh refuses to free the Hebrews. A bricklayer mutters the last theory. Conversation stalls. Politics itch more than lice. By late afternoon, stonecutters abandon chisels to scratch against temple walls, inadvertently brightening reliefs with flecks of blood. A sarcophagus painter, head wrapped in waxed linen, refuses to pause, dotting blue lotus petals, while insects skate across his ultramarine palette. You admire his resolve. He gifts you a shard of faience, blue, wards off evil. Unfortunately, not the crawling kind, currently scouting your collarbone. As sunset bleeds orange, the storm's rage subsides. Wind drops, dust settles, lice lose flight power. They tumble to streets, cloaks, wigs, some still wriggling, most not. A collective groan sweeps Memphis, equal parts relief and fatigue. You make your way back to the rooftop refuge. Soldiers sweep frog carcasses into mounds, now buzzing with, you guessed it, flies. Tomorrow's headline writes itself. You ladle cool well water over your head, watching last lice float away like evil peppercorns. The city exhales with you. Bells toll evening offerings. Banners flap at normal speed. Even the frogs, what remains of them, fall silent. Still questions itch deeper than any parasite. What force twists dust into living needles? Volcanic ash. Divine alchemy over dramatic scribes. You remember the scholars' trembling theories and decide explanations can wait until your scalp heals. Night drifts in. A palm frond fan delivers merciful air across linen sheets. You close your eyes, promising your battered skin that tomorrow can't possibly feel worse. Then you remember frog mounds plus desert heat equals a paradise for flies. Sweet dreams. The dawn feels gentler on your freshly shaved scalp until you open one eye and realize daylight is missing. Somewhere between the horizon and your rooftop, the sun has been swallowed by an airborne curtain that churns like black silk slapped against a drum. You cup a hand over your brow, squint, and discover the fabric isn't fabric at all. It's alive, humming, and already diving for exposed skin. Flies, sleek ochre bodies, rainbow sheen wings, come at you in battalions thick enough to dim shadows. Yesterday's frog mounds and louse corpses have matured into a buffet, and the local dipteran population clearly got the invitation. The buzzing is so loud, it feels physical, like tiny fists pounding a drum inside your ears. You yank the linen sheet over your head, but the insects squeeze through fraying seams and ricochet off your cheeks in search of moisture, eye corners, nostril rims, the tender cup of your shell-like ears. Half asleep, you slap wildly, swatting more air than target, until one brave fly lands square on your lips. Suddenly, you're upright, gagging, wide awake, and already plotting revenge. Across the street, a perfume merchant, who yesterday peddled jasmine lice balm, is now brandishing cedar tar torches like an amateur exorcist. Flames spit black smoke, the one thing flies respect, and for a moment, you consider diving through his shop window to bask in the fumes. Instead, you sprint down the stairwell, swearing to every god you haven't memorized that you will never ever mock incense again. On the main avenue, chaos buzzes harder than the insects. Courtiers flail ostrich feather fans. Children whirl cloth slings over their heads, and livestock, those that survive the Bloodwater stampede in frantic circles, tails whipping. A donkey brays so loudly, most people jump. Flies swarm his quivering nostrils like they've found a portal to paradise. You vow to keep your own mouth clamped. At a corner stall, a cunning potter. Yes, that potter has switched from clay jars to glossy fly traps. He ladles sticky date syrup into shallow saucers and markets them as sweet oblivion for winged demons. A crowd coughs at the price, but still buys. Desperation is the new currency. You dip a finger into a sample dish and smudge syrup onto your neck. 5 flies immediately glue themselves to the goo. You flick them off with savage pleasure. Strange fact of the day, ancient Egyptians really did use fermented dates and beer to lure flies, sometimes floating meat in the mixture for extra allure. The potter is merely reviving vintage tech, call it retro pest control. Farther along, priests of Khepri, the scarab-headed god of the dawn sun, drag an enormous dung-ball effigy into the square, chanting that only Khepri can roll back this pestilent darkness. Scarabs and flies are distant cousins, you overhear a scribe explain, so the logic tracks if you squint hard and ignore entomology. He also notes with a scholar's wheeze, historians still debate whether Khepri's cult actually developed during Ramses II's reign or earlier under Horemheb. The scribe swats at a fly on his scroll mid-sentence, smearing ink living proof that academia and reality often collide messily. You push toward the palace district, determined to learn how the elites cope. Yesterday's courtyard clinic is now an improvised smokehouse. Braziers belch pungent bundles of myrrh, frankincense, and something that smells like scorched onions. Courtiers shuffle through the haze, wrapped in damp linen strips. One woman's diamond-shaped wig net is lined entirely with fresh mint leaves, a fashionable insect repellent if one doesn't mind smelling like a salad. You consider borrowing the idea, but can't spare the mint. A chef stumbles by cradling an ivory platter piled with roasted frog legs. You remember with grim clarity that protein shortage breeds culinary creativity. Inside the great hall, chaos has the courtesy to lower its volume. Stone walls muffle the drone somewhat, but tension fizzes. Ramses X finally appears flanked by fan bearers, flicking eagle feathers scented with cinnamon oil. The pharaoh's gaze is distant, yet his voice booms, "We petition our gods." They respond in due course, maintain order. A chomping fly ruins his gravitas, landing dead center on the royal chin. Ramses doesn't flinch, but an attendant lunges with a tuft of peacock plumes, missing twice before scoring a direct hit. The court pretends nothing happened, though you swear the vizier's nostrils flare in silent panic. Nearby, Hebrew envoy Moses. Yes, the man whose staff allegedly sparked the blood river speaks softly with his brother Aaron in a side alcove. You can't hear exact words, but the envoy's calm contrasts the court's frenzy, and that calm scares you more than the flies. In a side hallway, you stumble upon an impromptu medical ward. Physicians in leopard skin sashes dab honey on livestock wounds. Bees circle the sweet glaze, competing with the flies. Honey seals infection. A doctor snaps when you cringe. True fact, ancient Egyptians pioneered honey as an antiseptic centuries before your era's doctors rediscovered it. The wards smell like bakery, meets barnyard a nauseating combo, but the animals low contentedly, too exhausted to protest. Midday the sun tries to burn through the swarm, turning the sky into a sickly sepia lens. You join a volunteer chain scooping dead amphibians into carts, hoping to cut the fly buffet at its source. The work is revolting yet hypnotic. Every shovel load reveals twitching maggots, plague nested within plague. Sweat streams down your back. Flies drink it like happy hour. A teenage laborer jokes, "At least lice don't fly." You chuckle then shudder. Never tempt the cosmos. During a short break, a palace historian recalls an obscure chronicle. A similar fly scourge struck Egypt during the reign of Akhenaten, the heretic king who worshipped Aten alone. Perhaps Aten is jealous of Ramses' devotion to Amun. The historian muses, eyes wide, behind coal liner now smudged by insect legs. You tease that historians debate everything, including which facts historians debate, but the notion lingers. Divine soap opera or not, the plagues feel personal. By late afternoon, vendors debut a new product, miniature cages containing live hungry swallows. For a silver daban, they'll release a bird inside your house to devour flies, and then theoretically leave via an open window. You picture a swallow smashing pottery while chasing prey, and decide to rely on simpler tech smoke and patience. As twilight approaches, Memphis resembles a city under eclipse. Even torches fail to pierce the buzzing veil for more than a few cubits. But flies, like bad jokes, eventually tire. Cooling air causes them to settle on walls, on cattle hides, on exhausted bodies collapsed in courtyards. You hurry back to your roof before they bed down on you. Climbing the final ladder, you glimpse something uncanny. The Nile, still tainted, but less red, glints amber in the dusk, its surface stippled with fly corpses. Nature, it seems, is sweeping its own house. You lie on a mat doused in cedar oil, pull a woven fan close and listen as buzzing fades to sporadic droning. Stars prick the sky timid at first, then bright like hopeful eyes peeking through shutters. Your skin still crawls phantom movements where flies landed, but exhaustion wins. You inhale the woody smoke, drifting from distant braziers, and exhale slowly, matching your heart to the lazy swish of the fan. Somewhere faint laughter rises as a child counts fallen flies like bedtime sheep. You smile dark humor, the true constant. Tomorrow, Ramses' astrologers whisper of thunderclouds gathering over the Mediterranean. You mutter, let it rain, anything to drown the stench. Be careful what you wish for, but that warning comes too late. Sleep slides down like a curtain, and you slip under, chasing one silent wish, dreamless dark, without wings. You wake to an eerie stillness. No croaks, no buzzing, not even a scratchy chorus of phantom lice. It feels suspiciously peaceful until a low, rattling moo drifts across the rooftops, a sound so strained it quivers your ribs. You peer over the edge and see a farmer staggering down the alley, tugging a rope tied to a heifer that can barely stand. The cow's flanks heave, froth strings from her nostrils. She sags to her knees like a toppled column, then she goes frighteningly still. Welcome to plague number 5, livestock pestilence, also known as the day breakfast dies. You scurry down the stairwell, sandals, slapping clay steps still sticky with last night's cedar tar. The main avenue looks like a dropped chessboard of motionless animals, cattle horses, donkeys, camels, each frozen mid-breath. Herdsmen cluster in stunned knots, muttering that illness struck all at once, as if a god pressed pause on pulse beats. A goat bleats hoarsely, eyes rolling. Her herder pets her face and hums a lullaby that can't compete with the rising wail of pick up your pet's hysteria. 2 streets over, you find yesterday's smokehouse courtyard, now converted to an animal hospice. Palace veterinarians. Yes, ancient Egyptians had them rush between makeshift stalls applying poultices of garlic and beer mash to bloated bellies. One doctor drapes a linen square over a horse's eyes, whispering, "Shh." Sekhmet guides you. He presses a bronze stethoscope, basically a slim funnel, against the chest. Nothing. The doctor shuts his own eyes for a beat, then reaches for a reed brush and paints a small ankh on the flank. It's a Mercy brand dead, or too far gone. You retreat throat tight. The air smells of hay sweat, and something sour like spilt milk curdled in the sun. Speaking of milk, your stomach grumbles. You were counting on cow's milk for breakfast porridge. Now, the dairy district looks like a battlefield. A clever vendor hijacks the moment, waving clay bottles labeled pure goat. Goats seem strangely untouched, so far cueing a black market surge. You elbow through the crowd, trade 2 Devon coins and a half-melted lump of scented sand for a jug. The vendor assures you it's fresh. You breathe in hints of thyme and, is that frog? Nope, your imagination's still traumatized. You gulp anyway, chalky, pungent, life-saving. The potter, who by now deserves his own sitcom, has pivoted again. He's sculpting little clay goats, hollow inside, pitch-sealed, perfect for smuggling milk past guards who've begun rationing. He calls them utter cuddlers. You roll your eyes, but buy one. Creativity deserves a tip. Besides, hiding protein feels prudent when your breakfast literally keels over into the street. Near the harbor temple, priests stand beneath enormous banners of Hathor, cow-eared goddess of joy and nourishment. They swing sister rattles, singing hymns that quiver in the hot breeze. 3 weeks ago, they paraded a newborn Apis bull through Memphis in a gold leaf litter, a legitimate historical event meticulously recorded on temple walls. That sacred calf was hailed as a living link between Pharaoh and Ptah. Crowds tossed lotus petals, and Ramses too flashed the grin of a ruler, clearly favored by the gods. Now whispers circulate that the Apis calf collapsed at dawn too. Historians still debate whether the elaborate Apis cult burials were heartfelt piety or political theater. One senior scribe murmurs as he inks a hurried addendum onto yesterday's disaster log. Either way, the optics today are catastrophic. Outside the grain exchange, panicked traders shout new price points faster than you can blink. Barley triples, beer doubles, leather plummets. Dead cows don't tan themselves, and goat futures skyrocket like a chariot ramping off a sand dune. Somewhere, the entrepreneurial teen tries hawking locust-free wheat in advance optimistic kid. You sidestep a shepherd bargaining a family heirloom ring for 2 buckets of goat feed. In crisis, love is measured by how loudly your stomach growls. Mid-morning heat turns the city into a kiln. Carrion birds circle low, but many animals drop too fast to rot. They just stop. A palace herald proclaims a citywide quarantine zone around the royal stables. Ramses' prized warhorse's descendants, so the story goes of the stallions that carried him at Kadesh, now lie on straw pallets while grooms whisper prayers. You remember reading future textbooks praising Egyptian veterinary practice. These people invented metal surgical tools for cattle hooves, yet even their cutting-edge care can't outrun supernatural pestilence. You slip into the temple of Imhotep, patron of healing. Cool limestone offers relief. Incense of juniper and sweet myrrh curls into shadows. An elderly healer cracks open alabaster jars of fermented honey, smearing it across animal wounds. Strange but true fact, Egyptians mixed honey and crushed dates to coat bandages, nature's antibiotic, long before penicillin. Unfortunately, even honey can't restart a heart that suddenly forgot how to beat. Near a pillar, you overhear a whispered debate. Could volcanic ash carry spores that poison grazing fields? Asks one physician. Another counters, perhaps frogs rotted bred bacteria that leapt to flies, then to cattle. Conjectures twist like startled eels. You had a quiet thought, maybe this is simply Plague 5 on an epic checklist. But you keep that theory to yourself. Nobody wants to hear cosmic agendas while their livelihood dies in front of them. Noon brings scalding sun and a new offense, the stench of mass cremations. Cremation is rare for Egyptians obsessed with preserving bodies, but the risk of disease outweighs tradition today. Bonfires roar by the riverbank, black plumes mirroring the earlier fly clouds. You watch solemn farmers send oxen to pyres, eyes glassy. A few collect ashes for later. Legend says mixing bovine ash with wine can combat internal heat demons. Desperation breeds interesting recipes. A court runner sprints past, spouting orders. All surviving livestock must be corralled north of the city, closer to grazing marshes deemed pure. You picture thousands of bleeding refugees trekking in dusty lines, the world's saddest pilgrimage. You recall the goat jug rattling under your arm and clutch it tighter. Afternoon shadows lengthen. You pass a humble courtyard where children solemnly bury a pet calf beneath a fig tree, humming an off-key lullaby taught by elders. Soft eyes sleep. Soft eyes wake in fields of dawn. One girl sprinkles hibiscus petals. Another tucks a carved wooden rattle into the shallow grave. You swallow hard. Grief always feels bigger when it wears small sandals. Back on the avenue, economic improvisation blooms. A perfume maker distills morning balm from black cumin and cedar marketed as aromatherapy for sorrow. A butcher sells salted frog jerky under a banner reading "Still hopping with flavor." Crass, yes, but survival loves a side hustle. You snag a strip chew skeptically. Tastes like despair glazed with soy sauce. As dusk cools the baked stones, the city pauses. Exhausted citizens line rooftops, silently counting which stars appear. Some light lanterns in memory of felled beasts. The skies respond with bruised clouds piling high over the delta. Remember that thunder talk. A distant rumble hints the atmosphere is loading the next catastrophe. You sip rationed goat milk from the clay utter cuddler savoring its grassy tang. The potter's silly design suddenly feels sacred proof that humans keep sculpting hope even while the universe plays whack-a-mole with their food chain. You lay out a mat near the parapet. A gentle night breeze flutters the linen of your hastily stitched mosquito veil post-fly innovation. From somewhere below, a lone shepherd pipes a mournful melody on double reeds, perhaps a tribute to lost cattle or a lullaby for you. His notes coil upward, cushioning your ears like velvet. You close your eyes, whispering gratitude for goats, clay jugs, and the fact that at least nothing is falling from the sky yet. A flicker of lightning on the horizon answers with a sarcastic wink. You sigh, tuck the jug under your chin, and slide towards sleep. Rehearsing tomorrow's potential script, hail the size of papyrus scrolls. Why not? The melody continues soft and wavering until even the crickets pause to listen. Morning comes wearing the metallic tang of rain that never quite arrived. The clouds you watched crackle overnight have scattered into ragged rinds, leaving behind a humid stillness that feels too thick to breathe. You roll off your mat, stretch, and hiss as a small, angry welt flashes pain along your forearm. At first, you assume a leftover mosquito ambush, but when you touch the swelling, it pulses hot, as if someone tucked a live coal just under the skin. You shuffle to the stairwell mirror, a polished copper disc hung for rooftop vanity, and lift your tunic sleeve. One blister, then two, then a constellation crawling toward your elbow, swollen crimson and glossy, like pomegranate seeds glued to flesh. The sight steals your breath. You pivot, scan the alley below. Citizens stumble from doorways, some clutching shoulders, others faces all wearing identical masks of shock that bloom to horror as they trade looks. A mother lifts her toddler. The child's legs are speckled purple-red. The mother's own neck sports a blister shaped disturbingly like the Nile Delta. Boils you realize and your stomach drops like a limestone block because this is the sixth item on the cosmic itinerary. Yesterday, the universe stole breakfast. Today, it threatens your skin. You hurry down to the street. Every footstep sends micro tremors through your sores, tiny drums that beat inside burnt leather. A queue already forms outside the temple of Sekhmet, goddess of healing and warfare, ironic pairing you'd joke about if you could laugh. Priests in leopard skin sashes pass out strips of linen soaked in cool water, laced with crushed mint. You press one to your arm, steam rises. The relief is exquisite but fleeting. Inside the temple courtyard, chaos hums at lower volume. Pain stifles theatrics. Doctors flip through palm fiber notebooks, reciting remedies from the Eber's Papyrus, Egypt's massive medical compendium. One needs bread mold with honey, and goose fat and early antibiotic poultice real Egyptians swore by. He smears it over a merchant's blistered back. It smells like bakery meets barnyard, but the merchant exhales a shaky thank you and nearly faints from gratitude. You remember yesterday's honey wards for horses and wonder if the gods are recycling plot points. Nearby, a teenage acolyte drops a basket of bitter herbs, willow bark, coriander, and something that looks suspiciously like ground crocodile poop. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Crocodile dung draws out evil heat. Strange fact of the day, ancient contraceptive recipes did include crocodile dung, but whether it cures boils or causes lawsuits remains untested. The potter bandaged across both hands, like a mummy audition limps, and holding a tray of new merchandise miniature faience hippos painted with blue lotus patterns. For luck, he croaks, voice ragged. You nearly buy one support local artisans, right? But a blister pops on his palm, and he yelps, toppling the tray. Hippos shatter like teal fireworks. Luck is in short supply. Rumor darts through the colonnade. Ramses II himself has taken ill. The image of the invincible pharaoh, hobbling with angry welts, sends a hush through the crowd. A palace herald arrives moments later to deny everything His Majesty is untouched. He merely observes quarantine. His voice cracks on untouched. You note a bandage at his neckline, seeping dark spots, and file the denial under nice try. Back outside, the air simmers. Boils thrive in heat. Memphis today feels like a slow cooker. Vendors pivot again. One sells clay pots of cold natron slurry, alkaline salts. Egyptians used both for mummification and apparently makeshift ice packs. You buy a scoop, slap it on your forearm. It fizzes like angry soda, but dulls the burn. Down the avenue, you encounter what looks like a traveling pep rally. Musicians beating frame drums accompany dancers draped in copper bells. They leap and twirl, yelling praises to Bess, the dwarf god who wards off illness. Each kick sends bells jingling, supposedly scaring demons away. The onlookers join the dance, moaning less in joy than in, "If I don't move, I'll scream." You sway too carefully. For one delirious minute, blister pain syncs with drum rhythm, and you almost forget the boils. Almost. Mid-morning, a scholar. You vaguely recognize the one obsessed with volcanic algae corners you outside a bread stall. He's fever-sweaty, scratching his belly through linen. Historians still debate whether these boils were anthrax lesions from tainted animal hides. He whispers, eyes shining with morbid excitement, or perhaps smallpox ushered in earlier than once thought. He gestures at your arm like it's a museum exhibit. You back away, promising to donate your corpse to science if that helps him sleep sarcasm. Maybe too sharp, but pain erodes politeness. You limp toward the Nile, seeking breeze. The river's color has faded to rusty rose, but its banks are eerily silent, without cattle lowing. Cremation pyres smolder on the opposite shore. Gray columns merge with midday haze. At a pier, fishermen dunk nets, hoping fish have returned. One hauls up 3 catfish alive, yet their scales ooze sores similar to yours. He drops them back with a choked sob. Dinner is canceled. By early afternoon, the first cases rupture into open ulcers. A young soldier collapses near the market gate, armor chafing cracked skin. Medics slice the cuirass off, revealing blister mosaics across his chest. They douse him with cool vinegar stings, like betrayal, and bind him in linen. Another soldier straddles the wall, picks at his elbow, and mutters, "Better battle scars than this coward's rash." Pride dies slower than livestock. Seeking respite, you slip into a perfumery that doubled yesterday as a lice-repellent shop. The owner now steams frankincense with myrtle, claiming the vapor calms angry skin. You inhale the citrus-sweet fog. It tastes like memory of wellness. He charges 2 Deben for a minute in the mist, worth every coin. Outside, you notice something uplifting. Goat herds ambling healthy in a side street, their keepers distributing cups of warm milk to children with mild boils. Comfort food come placebo. You accept a cup, savor the grassy sweetness, and realize goats have become Memphis's emotional support animals. Late afternoon sun blazes. Streets shimmer. Every step threatens blister rupture. You retreat to your rooftop refuge, hauling jars of natron slurry bitter herb paste and enough goat milk to bathe in if necessary. You rinse your arm, watch pink water trickle off the edge. Pain throbs, but recedes to a dull pulse. Maybe the bread mold honey bandage is working. As daylight fades, song drifts from nearby rooftops. Families chant the lullaby you heard at the calf's burial, but with a new verse. Soft skin heals soft skin, wake in fields of dawn. The tune floats in minor key haunting, oddly hopeful. Lightning flickers again on the horizon, those thunderheads you wished for still gathering. You glance upward, half daring the sky to escalate. A chill gust answers, carrying a hint of smoke and ozone. You settle onto woven mats, gingerly arranging limbs to avoid pressure points. Stars appear, each a cold spark beyond earthly blisters. You close your eyes, breathe through throbbing heat, and imagine Bess dancing tiny jigs across your sores, ringing bells, shooing demons. Ridiculous, but the mental picture snags a grin from cracked lips. Before sleep claims you, a final thought surfaces blood and water, frogs and beds, dust that crawls, flies, that darken cattle that fall, and now boils that burn. 6 dominoes down. The scholar's voice echoes volcanoes, bacteria, spores, anthrax, but rational maps crumble in mythic storms. Whatever the source, you're halfway through the gauntlet, whether your skin approves or not. You wince, shift, exhale. Tomorrow, lightning promises drama. For now, you chase a fragile dream, a breeze cool enough to soothe, but gentle enough not to tear fragile blister scabs. Sleep tiptoes in bearing a fan of cedar leaves and the faint jingle of Bess's silver bells. You drifted out of an uneasy sleep to the hiss of wind ripping across the rooftop like an angry chef's knife against whetstone. First thought, another dust storm. Second thought, as a sudden clatter rebounds off every mud brick wall, those are pebbles. Except pebbles don't melt into slush on impact. You sit up, blinking at the pale dawn, and spot white pellets hammering balconies, cobblestones, and unfortunately your own stash of goat milk jars. Hail, marble-sized and wickedly cold, pelts the city in a rattling drum solo. A split second later, lightning cleaves the blanched sky, followed instantly by a thunderclap that shakes plaster off the ceiling below. On the heels of ice balls, tongues of flame lash down dry thatch, catches like tinder, and oil lamps knocked from windows explode into orange fans. Ancient Egypt isn't supposed to host winter weather and fire tempests in the same breath. Yet here you are, sandwiched between ice cubes and pyrotechnics, wondering if the gods are improvising or trolling. You scramble beneath the half-roofed stairwell. Hailstones ricochet through gaps, thudding into your shoulders with bruising enthusiasm. You risk a peek across the lane. Yesterday's natron vendor flips storage baskets upside down as improvised helmets. 2 hailstones punch straight through the reeds. He reconsiders and ducks indoors. Down in the marketplace, awnings shred like parchment. A merchant screams as a fist-sized chunk punches through his frog jerky sign, scattering leathery strips onto soggy ground. Another bolt of lightning arcs sideways, crackling along a bronze gate before leaping to a stack of straw mats, which whomp into flame. Ice and fire trading turns. This is meteorology run by a bored playwright. You remember a rare chronicle you once skimmed in a museum. The Papyrus Harris lists a rain of stones striking Egypt during a late period flood. Turns out that was an embellishment. You're living the reboot. Legit history accomplished check. Instinct shoves you toward the Temple of Amun, whose massive pylons promise decent cover. You dash sandals, slipping on a slurry of crushed ice and mud. Cold pellets batter your boiled flesh sores. Pain rewrites profanity guidelines in your head, but you keep moving. Reaching the colonnade, you press against limestone, still warm from yesterday. Inside, priests upturn gilded offering tables to shelter children. Hail thunks off gold and cheerful clinks, a perverse xylophone. A novice priest mutters, "Set must be riding the storm chariot." Another older priest retorts, "Set deals in sand and thunder, not ice." Their theological spat dissolves when lightning splits a sycamore in the forecourt, sending burning branches skating across hail-white ground, ice sprinkling sparks like cinnamon on rice pudding. Unusual fact for the day. Giant ice mixed with fire can caramelize figs still on the tree. A terrified cook will later discover hail-roasted fruit tastes surprisingly good. Survival snacks arrive in strange packaging. Near the sanctuary entrance, the potter crouches. Yes, the guy again clutching a half-finished clay tablet over his back like a turtle shell. "Thought I'd fire these in the kiln, not the sky," he quips, voice jittery. You both flinch as another stone slams the courtyard. He adds, "If we outlive this, I'm making roof tiles. Pragmatism, thy patron, is a potter with 9 lives." Inside the hypostyle hall, torches sputter from downdrafts. Water and smoke braid in the beams, perfuming the air with cedar and ozone. An official dashes past, reading a proclamation. Already soaked and tearing, all grain stores are to be secured. Too late, you see hail punching holes through reed granary roofs, showers of wheat bouncing into the streets, where blessed goats skate after kernels like children chasing marbles. At an inner wall, you spot that tireless scholar cloak over his head, scribbling furiously, even as droplets smear ink. Historians still debate whether this plague combined Barad Hebrew for hail with volcanic fireballs he babbles, teeth chattering. He points at you, ink-stained finger trembling. Primary witness. You shrug, present your blistered arm and goat milk jug as exhibits A and B, then suggest he shelter before his papyrus liquefies. A boom deeper, closer rattles columns. You peer out the royal grain silo's thatched roof, collapses inward under the icy onslaught, sending a white avalanche of barley onto the ground, followed by a rogue flame leaping from a toppled torch. Grain plus lightning equals instant bonfire. Farmers howl, soldiers scramble with leather buckets, but water freezes mid-arc into slush bullets. The surreal image etches itself blue-white hail, peppering a golden fireball like confetti over a giant cupcake. If only it smelled half as sweet. Suddenly, trumpet blasts pierce the din. Ramses, too, strides into the open courtyard, cloak whipped sideways. A pair of servants shield him with bronze shields that ping like cymbals under hail. Pharaoh raises his crook staff. Thunder growls on cue. Nice stage management. He bellows, voice amplified by the stone canyon. People of Kemet seek shelter. The gods test our resolve, not our reason. Another lightning fork cracks behind him, backlighting his silhouette like a movie poster. Even you have to admit, dude knows dramatic timing. His vizier helmet dented by hail announces that palace granaries farther upriver remain intact. Rations will be distributed once the storm calms. A ragged cheer sputters half hope, half desperation. You can't help noticing the vizier's bronze helmet smoking gently where lightning kissed it minutes ago. He smells like seared duck. Hours blur. Ice stones shrink, becoming sleet, then chilling rain. Fires hiss out in towers of steam. You lend hands dragging smoldering thatch off rooftops, sloshing through ankle-deep slush. Your boils love the cold numb beats burn, but fingers stiffen. A carpenter improvises mittens by tying linen rags full of goat hair around wrists. The look ridiculous, the warmth heavenly. By late afternoon, the storm sputters, then dies, leaving a drenched silence broken only by drip plops and distant goat bleats. Streets look dredged from two nightmares, white slurry dotted with black burn scars. Survivors emerge, blinking cheeks ruddy from cold relief, carving soft lines under eyes already hardened by blood rivers and dust lice. You spot kids collecting hailstones into baskets, future refrigeration for date wine slushies, because humans recycle catastrophe into party tricks. You follow a trail of steam to the riverbank where shattered ice floats amid ash. Fishermen chip hailstones into jars, muttering, "Free water, no frogs." An elderly woman stoops to pick a flaming reed still smoldering on wet ground. She uses it to light her cooking brazier, nodding thanks to whichever deity mixes fire with hail so supper doesn't have to wait. A royal crier staggers through, announcing tomorrow's temples will hold twin ceremonies, one to appease, set one to hail, pun unintended, Ra's victorious son for ending the storm. Contradictory worship, why not? Insurance packages often come in bundles. Dusk settles, you limp homeward, cloak-soaked boots squishing like wine presses. At your rooftop, you wring water from linen mats, then lay them under a sky scoured clean as polished bronze. The air smells ion fresh, almost pleasant, though every muscle in your arms aches from hauling debris. You spot the potter on a nearby roof, holding up a hailstone the size of a pigeon egg. He toasts you with it, then pops it in his mouth. "Free ice," he shouts. You laugh, cough, and consider doing the same after checking it for goat droppings. You nestle beneath a dry corner, clutching a salvaged lotus fiber blanket. Bruised clouds drift away, revealing Orion's belt, that hunter eternally chasing prey he'll never catch. Sounds familiar? You breathe slowly, letting each exhale carry tension into the cooling night. The sting of boils, the bruise of hail strikes the spell of quenched fire. They fade into background static, while new crickets pick tentative notes. Half of Egypt's harvest, now steams in ruined heaps grain, could sprout mildew by sunrise, and tomorrow's ration lines will wrap the palace like ivy. Yet, as you watch, stars shimmer, like frost pinned to velvet, a fragile calm leaks in. If blood frogs, bugs, death boils, and skyfire couldn't break these people's will, maybe nothing can. Maybe you'll wake tomorrow, step over crunchy ice husks, and find someone selling hail roasted fig surprise with a discount on goat milk lattes. With that sleepy sarcasm, eyelids sink. Your last waking thought is a callback to the crocodile dung sunscreen you mocked on day one. Maybe you should have kept some. Singed skin needs treatment. You chuckle softly, let the joke dissolve and slip under Egypt's freshly laundered sky. Sleep ends when the scent of fresh green shoots wafts up the stairwell, except there are no shoots left to smell. You lean over the rooftop rail and watch a horizon-wide curtain billow toward Memphis, like storm front made entirely of wings. At first, it looks refreshingly golden, a sunrise arriving late. Then the gold resolves into shimmering bodies that glint copper, where the light hits and the hum becomes a roar, and your stomach sinks to the floor, because breakfast, lunch, and next year's harvest are arriving with appetites larger than their tiny carapaces should allow. Locusts. Millions of them, maybe billions, crest the dune line, blotting the sky in fractal swirls that snuff the sun the way ink swallows parchment. By the time you bolt down the stairs, they're already landing, each insect greetingly testing leaf stem or morsel of ragtag grain left standing after fire and hail. You sprint past the alley where goats used to lounge. Even their efficient jaws can't compete with this living scythe. The animals bleat in outrage, retreating to stone courtyards while locusts saw its straw roofs. Down on the avenue, yesterday's hail slush has vanished beneath a rustling carpet. You step, and the ground twitches, wings crackle, and tiny faces glare back as if you're trespassing. A burly porter flails a broken oar like a paddle, scooping insects into torrents that simply split and reform behind him. Another man lights a torch only to watch flame snuffed by sheer density of wings stealing oxygen from the spark. The air smells of raw plant sap, sharp green, relentless. The potter. You find him, because of course he's everywhere, is selling reed baskets lined with palm oil, fresh locust fritters later, pre-order, he yells hair, and bandages alive with stowaways. You choke on a laugh. Sarcasm is the final shield. Yet curiosity nibbles you did wonder yesterday if roasted locust counts as balanced breakfast. Egyptians actually did eat these things seasoned with salt and dipped in honey, strange fact of the day confirm. Toward the palace granaries, soldiers beat bronze cymbals and wave smoky censers, hoping sound and stench will drive the swarm. Locusts treat the tactics like background music chewing merrily on the last reed mats covering grain vents. A grain scribe collapses head in hands, moaning that the tax quotas he balanced 2 moons ago now equal 0. His stylus snaps. He doesn't notice. You duck into an herbalist's courtyard, where families huddle under linen sheets. Locusts still wriggle beneath nibbling through fabric, like a surprise foot massage with teeth. A child shrieks as one insect climbs an ear. The mother flicks it away, then squeezes tears from her eyes. Could be fear, could be the stinging smoke of burning myrrh, bricks they've lit to ward bugs off. You help drape heavier blankets over the frame, but the weight presses on your healing boils. Pain sparks. You grit teeth and keep working. Acts of mercy are cheaper than goat milk now. Mid-morning, you hear drum beats echo from the Temple of Serket. Inside the forecourt, priests chant petitions to the scorpion goddess, whose symbolism has fascinatingly been adapted to defend against creeping devourers. They scatter powdered alum along thresholds, claiming it poisons insect mouths. You sprinkle some on your arm just to feel proactive. The taste of hope, if bitter, is still hope. Outside that indefatigable scholar interviews panicked farmers, quill flying, papyrus flapping. Historians still debate whether the stone relief at Karnak describing the sky eaten in a single day referred to a solar eclipse or a locust plague. He announces to nobody in particular, then tugs a locust off his nose. Today, I'm revising my thesis. You clap him on the shoulder, ink smears your palm. He doesn't care. Data is data, even scribbled in protein bug guts. For a tangible historical anchor, you recall the year Amenhotep III reportedly dispatched royal crews to burn incense trenches around fields to stop locusts, a documented event etched on limestone quarry stelae. Ramses II steals the idea heralds, instructs citizens to ignite rings of wet Nile mud mixed with frankincense. You join a line, heaving buckets of sludge. Together you smear it in thick circles. Smoke bellows pungent and humid. Some locusts drop stunned or suffocated, but front waves keep coming, leapfrogging the fallen, like soldiers scaling a siege ladder. By noon, fields beyond the city gleam metallic, stripped to stubble. Farmers who'd braved hail to salvage barley now kneel in dust fists full of nothing. A gray-haired woman chants curses you'd blush to repeat. Her husband stares ahead, catatonic. You crouch beside him, offer your half-empty goat milk jug. He drinks mechanically, eyes never leaving the ruin. When he finishes, he presses the jug back into your hands with a whispered dua, "Thank you." Hunger gnaws irony sharp. You stand inside an all-you-can-eat buffet if you're willing to chew the customers. A teenage girl already is. She skewers locusts on copper wire, holds them over a brazier fashioned from a broken hail bucket. The shells crackle, releasing a nutty aroma, surprisingly pleasant. She sprinkles salt, offers you one. You hesitate, remembering the protein shortage, then bite. Crunchy, smoky, weirdly like sunflower seeds. Balanced breakfast. Close enough. In the Palace District, Ramses II convenes an emergency council atop a terrace draped in linen that flaps under insect weight. Pharaoh wears a new headdress, a mesh veil of fine gold strands, shimmering with each locust impact, half armor, half statement piece. He decrees triple grain rations to families with children. The vizier scribbles while brushing bugs off papyrus, likely recalculating how negative numbers work. Still, the gesture calms the crowd. Morale, like harvests, can be devoured, if not fed. Afternoon sun turns swarm wings into stained glass shards, dazzling and horrifying. You join volunteers, hauling surviving goats and a handful of cattle north to the marshes where reeds still stand. Locusts prefer grains over tough sedge. Along the way, you pass sycamore figs, bruised by hail, now stripped bare by insects. One goat bleats at the emptiness, then nibbles a locust mid-jump out of spite. You pet her head. Spite tastes like victory. Returning at dusk, you crest a dune and witness the swarm lifting as one body drifting south in a rust-colored river that catches the last light like burnished copper. Fields left behind look combed by giants, nothing but soil and brittle stalks. The silence that follows is heavier than thunder. Memphis breathes in shallow. Night approaches. Faint laughter spreads as people discover the locusts didn't eat mud brick walls, water jars, or bless them beer. Someone rolls a cask into the square. You and dozens more drink foamy barley brew, ironically flavored by stored hail water, and roast handfuls of left-behind locusts over communal fires. They pop like corn. Kids squeal. Elders swap apocalypse recipes. Temporary carnival blossoms, because after loss comes the human compulsion to salvage delight. Up on your rooftop, The sky glitters stars unchallenged by wings for the first time all day. You chew a final roasted locust leg, wash it down with smoky beer, and thank whichever deity still punches your sleep card. Your boils itch less, maybe from smoke's antiseptic, maybe from distraction. You lay back, gaze at Orion again. He's still chasing prey, but tonight you sympathize with the quarry more than the hunter. Stomach full, miracle, and body humming from adrenaline crash, you drift towards slumber. The last thing you hear is a neighbor murmuring, "If the gods took our fields, they'll give us something else." Hope is elastic. It stretches across famine, over cracked soil, through night as heavy as locust wings. You pull that thought over you like a blanket, close, weary eyes, and let sleep chew gently at your edges instead. Dark arrives too early. One moment you're still licking locust salt from your fingers, watching Orion sharpen his belt buckle, and the next, the constellations wink out as if some cosmic librarian shut the sky's lamp with a decisive thunk. A collective gasp ripples across rooftops. You blink, expecting post-locust dust in your eyes, but the blackness is total viscous, almost warm. You wave a hand in front of your face. Nothing. The world has forgotten the concept of outlines. Someone, 3 houses over, laughs nervously. "Torch, please." A spark scratches, flares, and dies with a muffled pop. The darkness gulps fire like a thirsty frog, callback intended, and the laughter collapses into a squeak. Panic scuttles along roof tiles as neighbors realize it's not just midnight's usual cloak, it's an import from some vault beneath creation. You inch to the stairwell by touch, counting bricks with your toes. Each footfall echoes louder than sense. Memory becomes your flashlight. 5 steps down, turn left handrail. Of rough cedar, watch the loose stone, except you misjudge and bark a shin. Pain draws a hiss you can barely hear through the velvet hush. Even sound feels padded. This darkness is a sponge, swallowing vibrations and spitting back a soggy replica. On the street, bodies shuffle like blindfolded dancers. Someone calls your name, good sign that after 8 plagues you've made friends, but the voice distorts, soaked in the gloom. You answer. Your own words slur, as though clothed in thick wool. A child cries. Mothers shush on instinct, but the hush amplifies dread. You reach into your satchel for the malachite talisman you bought months ago for luck. Rumor claims crushed green stone glows faintly after long exposure to sunlight. You cup it in both hands. No glow. Figures. A slender arm bumps yours, potter's apprentice, by luck or curse. "Got any clay candles?" you whisper. He chuckles darkly. "Even my kiln can't fire pitch black." He gropes your elbow and suggests heading to the Temple of Ra. If anyone knows how to coax light from divine ego, it's sun priests. You link sleeves and shuffle toward the avenue, counting door frames. The road that usually blazes with braziers feels cavernous. Somewhere, metal clangs a guard's spear meeting pavement as he stumbles. You hear a goat bleat, bless the goats, but the sound drifts without sense of direction. Spatial logic unravels. It's the strangest fact of the night. You can feel darkness as if it has temperature and texture, heavy, syrupy, clinging to hair like wet linen. Halfway, a tall shape emerges. No collides with you. Ramses' royal guard, a breathy voice. Bread for children. It's an elderly baker, clutching a tray you cannot see. You fumble to accept a loaf press, a locust jerky strip in return. Barter persists even when photons quit. At the temple forecourt, priests chant. The words quiver between frightened and defiant. Ra step from his bark pierce the veil. No answer. They light torches. Flames flare bright for a finger snap, then gutter, as though fuel refuses to burn in this atmosphere. One priest recalls an ancient inscription, Amos of Ace Tempest Stella, which described a sky without dawn for many days. Historians still debate whether that gloom was volcanic fallout or hyperbole, but standing here, you vote for Doctor Number 3, hostile magic with a flair for drama. Inside you stumble into the scholar yes, volcanic algae guy muttering about synchronous eruptions at Mount Etna and Thera. He swears sulfur dust can dim sunlight, though why torches die he hasn't a clue. You pat his shoulder, promise to peer review his panic later, and keep moving. Hours crawl. Priests distribute braided linen ropes and instruct citizens to tie themselves together in human chains so no one wanders off a key. You grab a segment, knot it around your wrist beside the healing boil scabs. The rope jerks left-right, advancing by communal guesswork. Occasionally, someone trips. The entire line tilts but doesn't break. Humor sneaks in. A youth jokes that at least locusts can't see either. Laughter bubbles weak but defiant. Around what should be dawn, darkness thickens. Roosters stay mute. Dogs whimper. You and the baker's daughter share whispered riddles to measure time, a lo-fi clock of punchlines and groans. 3 riddles equals maybe half an hour. Hard to know. Hunger prowls early. Without light cooking risks setting straw ablaze. People chew raw onions, dried figs, and yes, roasted locust leftovers. They pass bites down the rope line. You offer goat milk, still half a jug, glad it came in a clay utter cuddler. The pot keeps contents cool, no matter the apocalypse flavor. Sometime in the second night, your inner compass flickers. You unhook from the rope, trusting echo memory, and feel along a courtyard wall until fingers find cool stone reliefs scenes of Thutmose III smiting Syrians. You sit back against a war god and breathe. Darkness presses both ears until your own pulse sounds like kettle drums. You whisper the lullaby of soft skin healing voice, tiny but present. Footsteps pause. Unknown company joins the song. Without sight, you harmonize layering courage onto pitch-black canvas. A surreal detail surfaces. Cats rule the darkness. Feline yowls echo. Their night vision thrives, where yours fails. One brushing your knee drops something likely, a half-eaten locust gift in your lap before sauntering off. Bastet's silent blessings. On what may be day 3, you sense a tremor through the stone distant horns. Ramses's heralds announce a decree. You catch fragments about communal fires at noon using tar-soaked papyrus sealed in bronze bowls to resist smothering. The plan is absurd, so is everything else, so you volunteer. At the riverside, you ladle tar, in pitch dark, guided by temple acolytes, chanting step counts so nobody tumbles into the Nile. Someone mutters about crocodiles having the last laugh. You flash back to the crocodile poop sunscreen. Remember Sunburn's smile at irony today. Everyone would pay for any burn if it came with light. Bronze bowls ignite brief suns within May's hell ink. They hold steady. A ragged cheer erupts the loudest sound in 48 hours. You glimpse the silhouettes for the first time, faces streaked with ash, eyes shining like wet obsidian. Flames shimmer off the Nile, revealing swarms of dead locusts, bobbing like oily confetti. Grotesque beauty. The light lasts an hour before gloom swallows it, but spirits rise. People compare outlines. You grew a beard. That soot genius jokes bloom because laughter is photosynthesis for humans. Exhausted, you climb back to your rooftop rope guides. You feel the mat still there, untouched. Lying down, you realize darkness robbed time, but gifted intimacy, strangers, braided by ropes, jokes, shared onions, communal fire. Maybe that's the hidden curriculum. As you drift, a final strange sensation tickles eyelids' grayness. Not light, but a dilution of black. You open eyes. A single star pricks the horizon, then another. Like breadcrumbs out of nightmare constellations reassemble. When rosy bands finally creep up, the entire city exhales one throaty sigh of reunion with dawn. You laugh soft, incredulous, and turn face to warming east. Frogs lice, flies boils, hail devouring locusts, now tangible night. 9 dominoes toppled, only one stands. You know its name and dreadnought's stomach. But for this fragile sunrise moment, you let eyelids dip, riding the thin line between relief and foreboding. The day after 3 nights of smothering darkness feels like a fragile dawn after too many sleepless shifts, but something in the air is wrong, hushed, brittle, almost apologetic. You stand at the parapet, waiting for the usual clamor of merchants and goats. Nothing. Down every lane, muted figures drift like smoke faces, gray mouths slack, each cradling a limp bundle, or leading a cart draped in linen. There's crying, but curiously subdued, short stunned bursts that fizzle into stunned silence. A neighbor shuffles past, carrying his teen son, the wrestler, who once joked that boils were cowards' rashes. Now the boy's head droops at an unnatural angle, lips, blue eyes half open, as if surprised to be so still. Your chest contracts. The 10th plaque, you realize the whispered finale death of the firstborn. You descend the stairs on legs of wet papyrus. Every doorway offers a tableau of grief, a mother stroking the cheek of a boy who should be threshing grain, a grandmother rocking a shriveled infant, while a stunned midwife whispers apologies to invisible gods. An undertaker pushes a wheelbarrow stacked with small wooden coffins, inventory he never kept before. He jerks his chin toward you. Need one. The question, half practical, half broken wrenches bile into your throat. No trumpet calls from Ramses' palace this morning, only a hollow wind stirring flags at half-mast. You follow a silent procession toward the grand plaza, where the pharaoh himself stands bareheaded, crown-discarded robe rent at the shoulder. At his feet lies a gilded litter, atop it beneath white linen, the outline of a child no longer breathing. They say this is Amun-Her-Khepeshef, his firstborn heir, the ruler who flexed ego beneath blood rivers, and Hale now looks scoured, voice frayed to a whisper, as he commands servants to prepare the funeral bark. A legitimate historical note surfaces. Reliefs at Abydos depict royal sons who never reached the throne, this moment's echo in stone. Beside the litter stands Moses' staff, planted face soft with sorrow, yet fierce with something like resolve. Around him clusters the Hebrew community, sandals, packed bundles, ready, eyes glistening with both grief and purpose. They whisper of a night where door lintels brushed with lamb's blood saved children sleeping inside an act you dismissed as folklore until now. Those whispers turn into motion. Entire families march out of side streets, falling behind Moses in rippling columns. It is a scene you recognize from Sunday school drawings. You'll one day recall the Exodus loading in real time. You wade through the crowd up to a knot of scribes, scribbling frantically on fresh papyri. One notes that the Ipuwer papyrus, an older document lamenting Egypt as if the river is blood and children are no longer, feels painfully current. Historians still debate whether Ipuwer is eyewitness reportage or a later metaphor, but breathing grief-thick air, you'd swear it's a front-page chronicle. Your arm brushes a perfumer friend, whose eldest daughter lies motionless on a woven stretcher. He tucks a clove sachet under her chin, explaining through tears that cloves guide fragrance in the field of reeds. An unusual fact, Egyptians sometimes placed scented cones of animal fat on the heads of the dead during banquets, letting perfume melt over them, aromatic tickets to eternity. Today, no one lights feasts. They lay silent cones beside still lips. The Potter faithful cameo approaches wheeling a cart piled with tiny Shabti figurines, clay servants for afterlife chores. 2 figurines free for firstborn losses, he croaks. His black-rimmed eyes leak even as he presses a doll into shaking palms. Moments later, you see him snapping his own firstborn's play flute over a knee, an offering no god requested. By midday, Ramses issues a decree carried by trembling heralds. Every Hebrew may leave at once. Anyone hindering them faces death. The plaza shifts. Egyptian mothers hand silver bangles keepsakes to Hebrew neighbors, wordlessly begging them to beg their deity to stop the dying. You remember a locust-roasted dinner shared with a family now packing bread dough in linen. Their son thanks you with a tired wave, then disappears into the drifting caravan headed east. The sudden outbound river of humanity dust rising behind is both tragic and oddly hopeful, an artery unclogging a fault line, resetting. You feel tugged after them, itching to escape these haunted streets, yet something anchors you. Perhaps goats, perhaps friendships baked during pitch-black nights, or the notion that rebuilding needs hands still alive. Afternoon sun falls on funerary crews, stacking stretcher upon stretcher. Priests chant low, tears glint like crystals on bronze lamps finally burning bright again. A nursemaid explains she's swaddling newborn second sons in amulets of Taweret goddess of childbirth just in case. Her wisdom sounds shaky, but necessary. Hunger strikes, but bread stalls are shuttered in mourning. You munch a stale fig roll from your satchel and watch the sun creep west, casting long bars of gold across abandoned toys, a clay hippo, a knucklebone dice, a tiny boat carved from tamarisk. Grief is a scattered toy box no adult knows how to tidy. Evening paints the sky rose and indigo. Funeral pyres flicker near the river. Lotus oil torches bob on water, carrying whispered names into current. Downstream, Hebrew torches march away like earthbound constellations. The twins of sorrow and exodus braid into a single silhouette you'll never forget. You climb your rooftop by twilight fingers, grazing handrail grooves engraved by earlier plagues. The city below feels hollow, yet its bones remain. Goats bleat stubborn survivors. A neighbor's voice breaks the hush. We bury, then we plant. Simple words stake a fragile claim on tomorrow. You lie back. Stars return to duty. Somewhere, a lullaby drifts. Same melody that salved boils, now a dirge. Soft eyes sleep. Soft eyes wake. You close your own eyes, tasting salt, smelling wood smoke, hearing distant sandals on gravel. Choice flickers follow the caravan into the desert's blank scroll, or stay inscribe fresh lines on broken papyrus. For tonight, you choose neither. You simply breathe, cradle the city's heartbeat, and permit the weight of 10 plagues to settle like dust. Tomorrow, we'll pick a path. The torch of our long, uneasy vigil gutters at last. Over 10 nights, you stepped barefoot across crimson waters, croaked beneath ceiling-high stacks of frogs, scratched through gritty storms that turned to living lice and winced under black clouds of hunger-mad flies. You watched cattle topple skin-blister hailstones, ignite grain stores, locusts devour the embers, and darkness smother every candle. Tonight, the hush after the 10th domino, the breathless wail over Egypt's firstborn, settles on your shoulders like a heavy linen shawl. Yet within that sorrow, small flames of humanity refuse to go out. You shared goat milk beneath spider silk blackness, traded roasted locusts for laughter marched in rope chains, so no one vanished in pitch-dark streets, and found that even a potter, cracked by grief, could press hope into clay. You witnessed rulers crumble, priests improvise, and common hands lift one another again and again. The Hebrew caravan slips east beneath unfamiliar stars, carrying with it a promise etched in lamb's blood and midnight courage. Behind them, Egyptians gather the fragile pieces of a civilization rattled but unbroken. They will sweep frog bones, reseed black soil, fire new jars, and hum lullabies that remember both agony and endurance. The Nile will rinse itself clear, papyrus shoots will pierce silt, someone will joke about vintage hail-roasted figs. And you, whether you walk into the desert dawn or stay to stitch tomorrow's roof reeds, carry a secret survival is less about outrunning storms than learning to breathe inside them. So loosen your shoulders, soften your jaw, and let your heart beat slow to the river's timeless rhythm. The worst night has passed. The sky still holds stars, and morning will come quietly, gently, in its own persistent way.